Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Lead. We'll begin, of course, with the world lead as the Iraq security forces trained by the U.S. are dragged out and executed by the hundreds. President Obama may choose in the next few hours a course of action against the Islamist extremists overrunning that country. A White House official says the president's national security team will present a number of military options to him this evening. According to multiple U.S. officials, those options include more surveillance flights, both manned and unmanned, but not armed. The president could choose to hold off and develop more intelligence, either to use for U.S. purposes or to share with the Iraqis. If the intelligence is believed to be solid, the president could launch airstrikes. There's been a lot of talk about that. He could also decide to withdraw more Americans from the embassy and other places in Iraq before doing anything else. When Yahoo News asked Secretary of State John Kerry about possible airstrikes earlier today, he said they are on the table.
Well, they're not the whole answer, but they may well be one of the options. When you have people murdering, assassinating in these mass massacres, you have to stop that. And you do what you need to do if you need to try to stop it from the air or otherwise.
Today, a U.S. Navy ship with 550 Marines is joining other forces in the Persian Gulf, including an aircraft carrier, a guided missile destroyer, and a guided missile cruiser. The U.S. withdrew combat troops from Iraq 2.5 years ago, leaving behind American-trained Iraqi forces charged with securing the country. Right now, they are pretty much all that is standing in the way of a terrorist militia group called the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. ISIS is gaining footholds all over the country, creeping toward Baghdad. It already has control of Mosul, the second biggest city in Iraq, and it is taking more. ISIS claims it killed 1,700 Iraqi soldiers in Tikrit alone, though that has not been verified. What you're looking at here is video posted on a Facebook page by a man claiming to be an ISIS fighter. If you watch, you see 5 men sitting on the ground, hands secured behind their backs. The man with the gun speaks Arabic, we're told with a strong Tunisian accent, indicating that he may be a foreign fighter who's come over the border. He smacks the prisoners. He forces them to repeat, quote, "The Islamic State is here to stay." These propaganda videos are also evidence of a possible war crime because this man in the Iraqi military uniform, this man does not have long to live. Another video was posted, one we're not going to air. It appears to show the man had been executed at point-blank range. The U.S. has bolstered security at the American embassy in Baghdad, adding anywhere between 50 and 100 Marines and Army personnel, according to a U.S. official. In case you were choosing now to book your 5-day, 4-night trip to sunny Baghdad, the State Department strongly warns against all but essential travel there, adding that U.S. citizens in Iraq, quote, remain at high risk for kidnapping and terrorist violence. Our senior international correspondent, Nick Robertson, is standing by live in Baghdad. Nick, what is the mood in the capital like with these extremists saying that they are on their way right there?
You've got several things going on here, Jake. You've got a lot of anger that there is this sort of sectarian conflict going on. The Facebook video we're talking about just there, it shows, purports to show the execution of Shia soldiers in the Iraqi army. It's a documentation of a war crime, but in this city that amounts to, because it's a Shia being killed by Sunnis, that amounts to escalating the sectarian tensions. There's anger, there's relief that the government has finally decided to get tough, get real, go after ISIS. And then there's the feeling that everything isn't quite right, but life can carry on because they're not here yet. There's a few more cars out on the streets. Prices have gone up for food. People are complaining about that. The government's trying to tamp that anxiety and anger down. But overall, this is a city in waiting. It is a little worried. At the moment, it feels like that overrun by ISIS isn't going to happen tomorrow. But people, they're concerned, Jake.
Nick Robertson in Baghdad, thank you and stay safe. So with as many as 100 Marines and U.S. Army personnel at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, and some staffers already moved or moving to other locations, is a large-scale evacuation next. Are Americans at the Baghdad Embassy safe? Joining me now exclusively is Rear Admiral John Kirby, who is the Pentagon's press secretary. Admiral, thanks for being here. So just to run through these options again that we've been told, some of the options for the president to review. He's meeting with his national security team tonight. They include manned and unmanned but not armed surveillance flights, more intelligence gathering, airstrikes if the intelligence is sufficient, and withdrawing more Americans. On this point of withdrawing Americans, we know we have this amphibious assault vehicle with over 500 Marines on board that could assist with any sort of emergency embassy evacuation. What are the odds right now, does the Pentagon think, of such an evacuation, and how safe are the people at the U.S. Embassy?
Couple of thoughts here. First, the embassy is a very safe compound. You've probably been there yourself, Jake. It's big. It's well protected. There is no request by the State Department for any kind of evacuation. The embassy is still up and running, still operational. It's true that they relocated some of the personnel over the weekend, but again, the embassy's open for business. And look, I mean, this is always a tough call. You know how you make these kinds of decisions about whether to move or not to move. We are postured and ready should the State Department require that, but there has been no request, none at all. The embassy's still open.
Was this an intelligence failure? Did the U.S. Government not know that ISIS was gaining strength and was going to be heading towards Baghdad?
We have been watching ISIL, ISIS, however you want to refer to it. We've been watching their growth and development for some time now. Absolutely not an intelligence failure, none at all. We have been constantly monitoring the situation in Iraq, and we've been staying in touch with Iraqi government officials throughout. Don't forget, you still have, and have had since 2011, a small number of U.S. troops working out of the embassy there, as well as a pretty robust country team from the State Department there. So this is something we've been watching for a long time. Yes, they move pretty quick. And yes, as I said Friday, we were surprised and disappointed at how some of the Iraqi security forces failed to meet those threats up in the north. But it's not something we haven't been watching.
The Associated Press, I'm told, is reporting right now that the U.S. government is considering sending a small special operations team to Iraq, to Baghdad, to assist in some manner there to assist the Iraqi government. Is there anything you can tell me about that?
No, Jake. Actually, I'm not going to get ahead of options that the president may or may not use, and I certainly don't want to get ahead of decisions that he hasn't made yet. As I said before, our job at the Pentagon is to plan and to prepare and to tee him up options that are as robust as he wants to consider.
But that would be one of many options that would be on the table.
Well, again, I don't want to prejudge options here.
I want you to listen to what Secretary of State John Kerry had to say to Yahoo earlier today when asked if ISIS could take Baghdad.
I don't believe that they will in the near term, certainly, and I don't believe they necessarily can at all, but that remains to be determined.
Does ISIS have the capability of taking Baghdad?
Look, they certainly have proven capable of grabbing ground. There's no question about that. Baghdad's a different matter. And every indication that we have right now is that the Iraqi security forces are going to fight very, very hard to defend Baghdad. And I think that's exactly what Secretary Kerry was referring to. Should they want to do it, and I don't know what their intentions are, it's going to be difficult. Baghdad is a different beast altogether from the other smaller places that they have taken. But look, larger, we're all aware of this threat inside Iraq, and there's a shared sense of urgency here, and I think that's why the president is making it very important to spend time talking to his advisors, having meetings, and working through this decision-making process.
On the question of whether or not the U.S. should talk to Iran about trying to help with this situation, in some ways it almost seems like a moot point. Maliki is Shiite, Iran is Shiite. They are very closely allied. Reportedly, there are Iranian forces in Iraq right now. There certainly are advisors. If the United States moves to help Iraq, aren't we de facto working with Iran since they are so much a part of advising Maliki? Our
discussions are with the Iraqi government, and from a military perspective, it's with Iraqi security forces. And again, I'd remind you, we've been working with them since 2011, since the end of the combat mission in Iraq. There are no plans to consult with Iran about military activities inside Iraq. And our message to Iran is the same as it is to all the neighbors out there. We want a constructive role here. We want you to respect Iraqi sovereignty and territorial integrity.
But the U.S. has also said they want to work with all the players in the region. So if the U.S. went and were to meet with Maliki and there were other players from the region in the room, that's not something that the U.S. would discount, right?
Well, we have said we want to work with neighbors and partners. I wouldn't get into that particular hypothetical. And look, there's talks going on in Vienna right now,
right.
P5+1. I think it's certainly reasonable to expect that there could be, on the sidelines of those discussions, some informal discussions with Iranian leaders about what's going on in Iraq. But there's no plans to consult with them about military activities, certainly not military activities we are are potentially could conduct inside Iraq.
Just the people at home. Should the American people be prepared for the United States to go to war again in Iraq?
I think the president's been very clear that he does not foresee a return to troops on the ground and a combat mission in Iraq. What he has said is he's willing to look at a range of options, not all of them military, a range of options, to try to break the momentum of ISIL in there. And he's also been very clear that should he elect a military option, it would be limited in scope, in both scope and duration.
Just to clarify, combat operations, not the same thing as special forces, special operations.
Well, again, I think I'm going to...
I just want... Okay, Admiral Kirby, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Coming up next, as these terrorists continue to threaten Baghdad, is a U.S. military option the only way to stop them? We'll ask General Wesley Clark what he would tell the president to do were he advising President Obama. Plus, I'll see you guys in New York. Those words from the leader of ISIS to a U.S. Army colonel in Iraq 5 years ago. Was he threatening an attack on U.S. soil or something more benign?